Werewolf the Apocalypse Earthblood is disappointing. While the E3 trailer promised a game where you're a badass werewolf with an engaging plot, we instead got a mediocre hack and slash with stealth elements, graphics that look like an Xbox 360 game, and a by the numbers plot that lost its way. Keep in mind that this is based on the Werewolf the Apocalypse tabletop game, and despite it having so much lore, the developers wanted the game to act as an introduction for newcomers. But despite that proclamation, it barely provides lore or insight to the world that the player is being thrusted into. Terms, characters, and events are thrown around without much of an explanation, and even when the game attempts to give some sort of insight, it's just relegated to minute story details. For example, the game introduces us to an enemy called the Black Spiral Dancer. To newcomers, this is just seen as the evil werewolf, but when you look up the name on Google, you find out that these are tribal werewolves that are corrupted by the worm and serve them. This may seem like a nothing point, but when there are games that provide character bios or lore information in-game, it just turns a franchise with so much lore into something generic. What's weird is that later on we meet a character that fits the description of a Black Spiral Dancer. Onawa is the leader of the Red Talon tribe, and she has a connection to the guardian spirit Pachua. Due to Onawa getting corrupted by the worm, Pachua was also corrupted. Our main character Kahal has a weird feeling that she has been corrupted throughout the level, until we find out that she was corrupted when one of her Red Talons intercepted him while Kahal tried to save his daughter. A character was corrupted by the worm, and there was no mention of the Black Spiral Dancers or something to that extent? I don't know, that felt like a lost opportunity for exposition. On top of being allergic to world building, the game has a dialogue tree mechanic that doesn't do much of anything. It doesn't affect the story or doesn't affect any of the character relationships. It's just used to further conversations that would have been done without needing the option to choose what to say next. The game is a linear hack and slash with stealth elements. Nothing there screams dialogue tree. During gameplay, Kahal has 3 forms to toy with. Number 1, his human form. Kahal can hack doors and cameras by accessing terminals, can take down enemies either by using stealth or taking them out with your crossbow. Your crossbow can also take down cameras, and can sabotage enemy reinforcement doors, but the reinforcement doors will respawn the same amount of enemies even if you sabotage them, so don't waste your time. 2. His wolf form. Kahal in this form can avoid enemies and traverse environments faster due to his speed. It can also access the vents, which leads you to terminals. 3. His werewolf form. This form can only be used during combat segments. In the werewolf form, Kahal has 2 stances. His agile stance allows you to move fast and strong, which can allow you to take out enemies, especially enemies with silver bullets. Silver bullets will permanently lower your health until you kill all enemies. His heavy stance allows you to hit hard, but at the risk of moving slower. Each form has a special ability that can be used by dealing damage, filling up a gauge. Kahal in this form can also dodge attacks. He can also heal himself, and with certain upgrades, can even reverse the effects of silver bullets. Once Kahal has done enough damage, you can activate your Rage form, which has the speed of the Agile stance and the devastating power of the Heavy stance. But saving this power for future battles is fruitless since it resets after each encounter. Does that sound fun and interesting? Well, it is. On paper. Let's step back for a second and talk about the stealth mechanics. In this 6-hour game, there are only 2 encounters that forces you to go full stealth, and these 2 segments are relatively short and done for story purposes. Despite that, every single level puts you in stealth mode, and getting caught after those 2 specific instances doesn't matter. If you're caught, you can just turn into your werewolf form and button mash away against waves upon waves of enemies. Sure, you can avoid enemies by going in via stealth, but why are you being stealthy in a game that was marketed as be a giant werewolf? If the game has stealth for those 2 instances, then that would be fine, but the entire game wants you to move around undetected when there's no consequence for getting caught. The only way that would even matter is if you're speedrunning the game, but other than that, there is no reason for stealth to be this forced into the game. The actual combat is repetitive. You're just mashing the button until the waves of enemies are dead before you go to the next room to do the same. Even with the different abilities and stances, it's just you mashing the buttons over and over again. I had to play this game 3 times while making this video, so by the 3rd playthrough I was just listening to videos in the background just to drown out how monotonous the combat got after a while. But let's talk about the elephant in the room. This game looks interesting. I mean, this game came out on current and next generation consoles, and it looks like an Xbox 360 game. Models lack any real detail, and your skin is like wax. The only character that looks finished is Kahal, who is the main character. You know how in animation the foreground characters have the most detail compared to the background characters? That can be said about everyone in this game except Kahal. They even reuse a specific character model twice for 2 characters that speak, and I'm genuinely convinced that they just stole Oscar Isaac's face and threw it on this guy. Not only did they reuse character models, they also reused level assets, which means for 6 hours, you'll be looking at the same Endrin military facility, which makes the 6 hours feel like 6 hours. While the hub area changes once or twice, you'll be spending a majority of the time in generic military facilities. Even the prison area looks like any other level, but with people wearing orange jumpsuits. Sure, you go to a desert and a forest, but these areas are so barren and depressing. What's worse is that the fact that the game has trouble working at all. The game crashed on me several times and soft blocked me twice. when you respawn into levels, the textures aren't even present, resembling a PS1 game or a concussion. Even when transitioning to in-game cutscenes, textures and words pop in frequently, which is at worst immersion breaking. Enemies spawn from enemy door things, which I mentioned earlier, but instead of walking through these doors when they open, they just spawn in, which is painful. There are times when the enemies just float in the air when they die, and while that's funny, it just shows how unpolished this game is. Sure, crashes, lagging, soft blocking, and rendering issues are signs of a bad game, but this game physically hurt me. On my first playthrough, I used my headphones to get into the game and to block out any background noises. I had the headsets at a semi-high volume setting due to the quality being low, but nonetheless I booted up the game and the game let out a sound so loud and distorted that my family heard it. They heard it from my headphones, and that caused me ear pain for a couple hours. I've had games that could have given me a seizure, and I've played games that have made me nauseous, but I've never had a game physically hurt me to the point where I had ear pain for hours. On my second playthrough, I recorded footage for 6 hours straight for the footage to be corrupted, which leads into my theory that the game is cursed and should be tossed somewhere in Nevada. Another weird glitch that came to mind is the weird freeze lag that happens when you shoot enemies with a crossbow. Like when you shoot enemies, the game just skips a frame or the enemy ragdolls into oblivion. Speaking of, these ragdoll physics are hilarious, and while it's painful to look at, it looks like a glass of water in the desert. What else? Oh yeah, the cutscenes. Instead of explaining to you the source filmmaker level of god-awful these cutscenes are, let me just show you a couple of them in order to spare myself an aneurysm.
Right.
Rotko.
You'll regret that. Clever boy. Ultra, fall back!
Fucking silver. Tell me, where's Adana? Don't worry, Kahal. Your daughter didn't fight this battle.
We're supposed to have delivered ammunition 1 week ago. 1 week. Endrin doesn't like waiting.
Well, paying, clearly. You're not getting anything until Endrin is paid up. You can tell that to your President Watkins in person.
I don't think you understand what's at stake here.
Oh, I understand that you've just been attacked and you're looking to hit back. I also understand that you need our ammunition to do that. And we've got that ammunition right downstairs, ready and waiting to go as soon as you've paid us. Sorry, Major. The business is business.
Well, fuck you two. Then we'll attack Tarker's Mill without your help. And rest assured, Mr. Watkins will hear about this.
Tarker's Mill. Hey.
There you are. You must be Kahal. It's time for you to pay for what you've done to this company. Your daughter's hate and fears will make a perfect host for Banes. And as for your friends, well, I've got a score to settle with them too. It's high time they understood. Nobody attacks Endrin. Nobody. Launch Earthblood.
No! I'm gonna kill you, you motherfucker! You're gonna pay!
Yes, those are real. I don't really have to explain further, so let's talk about the story. Actually, let me back up for a second. Most of the cutscenes are in-game. While the CG cutscenes are its own brand of awful, the in-game cutscenes are robotic in both delivery and how the models move. The acting in this game is cheesy and all, but Cahal's actor especially sounds bored and flat.
I heard that the cairn was going to be attacked. I was afraid for you. For Adana. And how did you hear that? I overheard Endron talking about it on my last job. I may have left Tarker's mill, but I never turned my back on it.
Not only are they robotic in the cutscenes, enemies jitter and stutter while walking around, which is... Anyway, what about the story? The story is the weakest part of the game, as it just feels like a rated R version of Captain Planet. The Endron Corporation and the Worm plan to release a virus that will destroy the world, and it's your job to stop them. While this may seem pretty straightforward, this is just an oversimplification of how half-baked the plot is. These are the beats of the story, and you can tell how weird it is in how it's structured. 1. You're a Fianna warrior, and the plan is to attack an Endron facility. In order to keep cover, the pack decides to send your wife, who is the best spy they have. 2. Something unexpected happens, and you're sent in to save your wife. 3. Your wife gets found and killed by an evil werewolf. 4. Cahal kills the evil werewolf and loses control, killing one of his friends in the process. 5. Cahal decides to go on a self-imposed exile and leaves the pack. Pause. See how this goes from Captain Planet to a revenge story to a redemption story? And all of this happens in the first level. Let's continue. 6. 5 years have passed and Cahal, due to plot convenience, is around his own stopping grounds for a job. While infiltrating an Endron facility doing said job, he finds out that Endron plans to attack the pack. 7. Cahal does the job and runs back to the pack to see that Endron started the attack already and helps his pack fight off Endron. 8. Cahal decides to rejoin his pack and continues his mission to stop Endron. 9. After destroying an Endron training facility, they go to a fracking site in order to finally drive back Endron from their home. 10. Something unexpected happens and your daughter gets kidnapped by Endron. 11. Your pack leader loses control and you kill him. 12. You then go to a prison in Nevada, which is another Endron facility, to find your daughter, and after doing odd jobs in the prison, you find out that she's not there. But Cahal finds the leader of the Red Talon tribe and escapes with her. 13. The pack tells Cahal that his daughter is in Endron HQ, and Cahal goes to find his daughter. One issue is that the Red Talon tribe is corrupted by the Worm and sets a trap in motion. Onawa, the woman you saved, begrudgingly allows you passage, but like I said, they are leading Cahal into a trap. After tearing through Endron HQ, you finally catch up to your daughter, who is about to be taken away by a helicopter. You're this close to getting her back, but one of the Red Talons tackles you down, allowing your daughter to be taken away. 14. After killing one of the Red Talons, Endron releases the Earthblood formula, which turns her allies as well as the Endron forces into bug creatures. The game calls them Fomori. After dealing with them, you confront Onawa and free her from the Worm after defeating her in battle. 15. Cahal then goes to this Endron oil rig facility. In order to save your daughter, the pack wants you to clear out each sector of the oil rig in order to gain a foothold. After mowing down all the enemies that are in your way, you find 2 evil werewolves and you kill them. After a bit more walking, you finally find your daughter, but she was turned into a worm centipede kind of thing, and you have to fight her. 16. The fight ends with Cahal killing his daughter, and while you were fighting your daughter, Endron forces overwhelm your allies. The game leaves you with a choice: kill the Endron CEO or save your allies. If you save your allies, you all escape safely while blowing up the oil rig facility. Endron CEO will escape, and the game decides to sequel bait. If you kill Endron CEO, your pack dies, you blow up the oil rig, and the game decides to sequel bait. I've never played a game with such a simple plot go out of its way to not be simple. Like I've said before, the game drops terms and enemies from the lore without explanation, which leaves you confused most of the time. The direction of the plot changes all the time, which leaves no space for a character arc, and the worst part being that the plot felt useless. You spend 60% of the game searching for your daughter, going from room to room, killing enemies for hours on end, for it to mean nothing. Not only is your daughter dead, but either choice you make ends with another company getting the data, meaning we don't even get to stop the bad guys. The game feels like a waste of time, and that is felt throughout every aspect of the game. The combat is too button mashing and undercooked, the gameplay forces you to go slow as you sneak through areas, and that slowness is still felt while doing the fast-paced combat due to the copy and paste level design. The story drags you along through generic facilities, which is the equivalent to a long hallway, and the actual story is all over the place with no real payoff. Even if you want to play the dumb and repetitive combat encounters, you still have to go through the slow and tedious nature of completing a level. But you know what's worse? This game is rated F for mature, but it's censored to hell. There are finishing moves that have you stomping on heads and ripping enemies apart for the enemies to just ragdoll to the ground. There are even cutscenes where enemies are being ripped and eaten, but it's either hidden or the enemies ragdoll again. Like, why go through the effort of having pools of blood but no actual gore? And I'm not saying you need gore, but why would you make an M-rated werewolf game with enemies that spill buckets of blood and have scenes of ripping and tearing when there isn't any actual ripping and tearing? Usually there's a bright side, right? There's like, even in the worst game, there's like something funny or something, you know, good about it to an extent, right? But for the life of me, I could not find anything good about this game. I mean, you know what? The music is fine, right? There's a large soundtrack, but it feels like 2 to 3 tracks are being used in one continuous loop. There are 2 rock songs that, while good, feel like they were probably where most of the budget went, and if you were to use them in a, 6-hour stream, you can get claimed, even though they said that their soundtrack is okay to use in videos. Apparently it's a bot and they're trying to fix it, but after playing 18 hours, spread between 3 playthroughs and dealing with all the shit that came with it, it's a cherry on the shit sundae. This game gets a 1.5 out of 5. Look, honestly, despite how I feel about this game, I still want to thank Cyanide Studios for providing me with a review copy of the game. I appreciate the opportunity nonetheless, but other than that, this ends my review of Werewolf the Apocalypse Earthblood. Thank you guys for watching. I'd like to thank my patrons, Leo, Crit, and Hachi, and for $1 a month, your name will show up right here. I also like to thank Cryogenix for their amazing work on the thumbnail, and of course, Cyanide Studios for allowing me the chance to play their game, even if I wasn't the biggest fan of the game. Love you guys, and shamalamoomoo.